you want to, you can rechange the curve name. So by default, we take the same curve name as we have in the tag name of the tag we have assigned to this curve. But of course, if you want to, you could change that one to another name here. And then we have some other settings for or properties for this curve, which we can configure. So we can configure a lower limit and an upper limit. Important about the limits or limitations here inside of the curves. Even if you have an upper limit, for example, and the curve is going higher than this upper limit, so the value is higher than the upper limit, that means that PIM quality will still record this value, even if it's outside of the limitations. The limitations here can be used for the trend diagram later to have the borders of the value axis, for example. That PIM quality will still record the data even if it's outside of the limitation. So PIM quality does not say, okay, you're higher than the upper limit, so I do not record this value. No. So PIM quality is just recording all data coming from this tag, so all values, and the limitations are then just for the diagram so that you can have the value axis from the lower limit to the upper limit, for example, but this has nothing to do with the with recording the curve values here. Then of course decimal, so we want to have maybe, I don't know, 50 point and then 3 decimals here. We can have the unit, so for example, degree in Celsius here. We can have some notes, for example. Then we remember this maybe from the from the project settings. Sorry. In the project settings, we also have the default setting for archiving while the batch is stopped. So if the batch has a specific status, and we can change this setting here, of course, for all the curves again. So quite similar to the scaling property inside of the parameters, where we can have the default setting, but for the real parameter, or here in the quality for the real curve, of course, we can change this default setting for this specific curve. Then there is some release tag we can use. Release tag means only if this release tag we can add to this field has the value, in this case 1. Only in this case we will record the values of this curve. So that means, for example, if we add a tag to the release tag here and we have the release value 1, that means as long as this tag is 0, we will not record anything from this curve here. And at the moment, this release tag changes, or this tag value changes to 1, then we start recording the values of this curve in the cycle we have here configured, so in 1 second.
Yeah.
And if this tag is going to 0 again, so or to another value which is not that one here, then we start the recording again.
Giờ mình gắn cái tag đây, thì tag này bằng 1 cả đó.
So you can decide
cái bằng 1 đấy.
Thì nó bắt đầu record. So for example,
nó record theo 1 second.
Cái release tag là cái trigger
trigger. Ví dụ mình định số nào cũng được hết. Ví dụ định số nào chứ phải không 1.
I know, baking phase, because only then we have the temperature and we do not want to record all of the curve value before, for example. Then you can use the release tag, and you can also use as
nó đóng lại khi mà batch stop
for, or you have to use for the phases.
Được lưu.
So you can
là nó lưu xuyên suốt rồi.
If the
Đúng rồi.
tag we have
Thì hình như tích cái đó là nó lưu xuyên suốt luôn ha anh Châu.
Như vậy nó bảo là stop rồi ở khai là lưu
value goes to 4, because that was the baking phase, only then we want to record this curve, for an example. But for us, we just wanted to record the curve the whole time the batch was running, so we will not add an release tag here. And then, as I just said, you can add as many curves here as you want. And of course, you can use some other cycles to add some other curves to the other cycles there. So then, of course, you can delete the curve. So if you say, no, you do not need that one anymore, or it was a mistake or whatever, then you can delete it. Or we have now added this curve to the 1 second cycle. And if we decide that we do not need it that often or in that cycle, then we can also change the cycle assignment. And if I click on that one, then you can move the curve from the current cycle, so 1 second, to, for example, to 1 minute. So there's no need to delete that one and then create it in a new way. So you can just move the curve from one cycle to another. So that's it for the tag logging. So it's quite simple here. And now you see for the cycle 1 second, if I open that one, we have the curve available here. If we do a double click on it, then we're still again in the curve configuration here. And then of course, if you have more than one curve, then you will see all the curves here for this cycle. And of course, if you have multiple curves and multiple cycles, then you will see all of them after opening the cycle. So that's it for the tag logging. Now coming to the snapshots. You remember snapshots in quality are event-triggered readings. So if I open that one, you see that there are already 3 triggers available. So we have by default an batch start trigger, which triggers the event-triggered reading when the batch is started. We have the batch start and end trigger. So recording the data inside of this trigger will be triggered at the batch start and also at the batch end. And then there's the batch end trigger. So only at the end of the batch we will record this data inside of this trigger then just once, and we receive the data in at the batch end. And then of course we can add some manual triggers. And this is what we now do. So again, go to snapshots, go to new, and then we can add a new trigger here. And then we get a new window, and you see in the background, if I take it a little bit to the side, we have the new trigger here, where we can now configure, or we can freely configure when we want to trigger these snapshots. And we want to have a name, so for example, ingredients, because we want to record the ingredients after the dosing phase, for example, then we need a trigger event. So you see it's highlighted in red, so it's mandatory here. So we want to use the baking phase here. So the tag we needed or we used for the phase groups here. We want to use the same tag for that one. And now we can decide how often or when we want to trigger this snapshot. So you see we have upon change, so that means every time we have every time the tag value of this trigger or this tag is changing,
nếu mà nó change á,
trigger
thì nó sẽ
record
trigger.
of the snapshot.
Hoặc là nếu mình chọn cái này thì mình xác định là train vào giá trị nào thì
the record of the snapshot if the value of this tag changes to a specific value. So let me check which phase we had for the dosing. Dosing was the phase 2. So that means if we go back here, if we go to 3, then we're in the next phase after dosing. So that means all the dosing part is finished. And then we want to trigger the record of the snapshots. So of course, it's up to you to define the trigger here. So you can freely define the trigger if you need it just one time, if the tag value changes to a specific value, or if you just want to trigger the snapshot every time this tag you have selected is changing. Then we have some settings for the values. So normally we want the snapshot data just once. So that means if we trigger this event, so that means in this case here, this tag goes to the value 3, then we want to record the values, we will add it later. We want to record them just once. So we get the current state or the current value of the text we will configure for this trigger here. So this is read once for each event. Or we can say that after this event is started, we want to read it cyclic in 2 seconds, for example, and then we receive some more data there. But normally we have the tag logging if we want to get more data of the tag, and if we just want to have the tag value at a specific moment, then we select the snapshot. So normally we need this option here, and to add text to this trigger group, so that means which information do we want to
đọc, nó chỉ snapshot một lần.
Cái này á, bấm vào đây là không có chọn được cái này, là một lần khi mà cái trigger này đấy. Còn cái này một trigger xong rồi là bắt đầu đó, sau đó đến cứ 2 giây nó làm lần.
Vậy là cái này chỉ ghi lại được một thời điểm mà.
Đúng rồi, một cái thôi, once. Nhưng mà khi thay đổi thì nó làm lần. Có thay đổi thì nó cứ làm. Còn cái này á, là thay đổi một phát á, là nó cứ làm theo chu kỳ.
So it's a finished method, so we're finished with recording snapshots here. For this training project, we will not do this, but in real project, just enable that one, add a tag to this field here, and then you receive you receive an answer from PIM Quality when it is finished recording all the snapshots. This can be really important if you want to record a huge amount of values inside of the snapshots here, and then it can take some time, or it's not a huge time, but some seconds, can take some seconds until PIM Quality has worked on this snapshot and has recorded all of these snapshot values. And to be sure that we received all of the data and that we're not too fast in our process, we can use the finish message here. So for example, before we can go to the next step, while we have producing the product, we have to wait until we get the finished message after after the snapshot is triggered. And if we get the finished message, then we can go on with the next step and do the next thing, so start mixing, for example. So as I just said, in this training project, we will not use the finished message here, but as I just said, I recommend to use it in real projects. And the last setting we have here for the trigger group of the snapshots is batch name. So as I just mentioned yesterday in the presentation, you can have some manual input values or laboratory values or whatever for an already closed batch. And for that, you can use the snapshots and can use this option here. So with this option, so if we enable that one, then you see we have to add another tag here, and you see the option is for the batch name. So that means if we want to add data to a batch which is already closed or which is already finished, we need to enable this option here, add a new tag to this field, and then if we trigger this snapshot, then PIM Quality is looking inside of these tags we have connected to this option, and then there should be an batch name inside of it which already exists, and then PIM Quality do not add the data from this snapshot to the current batch. It is adding the data to the batch inside of the which is assigned from this tag then. So that means we can add the data to an older batch, so not the current one, so to an already finished one. And this is how you can add laboratory values, for example, to an older batch. We will do this later after we have created a batch and after we have created our reports and so on, then we'll come back to this setting here, add a new snapshot, and then I will show you how we can have or how we can add the laboratory values. But in theory, it's working like that. So you enable the batch name, add and tag there, and then during the process, you just search for the correct batch name, type the batch name inside of the tag we have assigned to this option here, and then we can add all the data inside of the snapshot to the batch we have selected here. Right, but as I just said, we will come back to this after we have done all of the PM quality part and after we know how to deal with the PM quality, and then we will come back to this a little bit more complex topic here. So now we just have configured our trigger or the snapshot, and now we have to configure which data we want to record after we are triggered from this trigger. And for that, as I just said, we go to edit values. And now it's quite similar as we have seen for the tag logging. So now we can just add all the values we want to record after triggering this snapshot here. In the first step, we can have another group name. So these are for the set points, for example. So set points, and we go to new value, and now we can decide which text we want to add to this group here. And we want to get all the set points, so set points here. So I just added the ingredient 1 set point, which we have used in the PM control. So that means we want to have the recipe values or the job values coming from the PM control, and we want to record them for the reports so that we know which was the set points we have received from PM control. So that's that part. Same thing or similar thing as we have seen for the trend curves. We can change the name of the value, so you see the name is the same one as for the tag we have assigned to this value here. If we want to, we can change that one. We have some limitations we can set, but same thing here. Even if the value, so even if this tag has another value outside of the limitations, we will still record it. So same thing as for the trend curves. And then same thing here, we have the decimal, we have a unit, we have the nodes available. So we want to have them in kilogram, for example. And now we can have some more values here, or we can delete a value. And for now, we just have this one group here. And if we now click on OK, and click on OK, and now you see for this trigger, we have a group inside of it with the name set points. And if we open that one, this group contains the 2 values we have added to it, so the set points of the ingredient 1 and the ingredient 2. And now we want to add another group to this trigger. So for that, we select the trigger, go to new and add a new trigger group. And now we do want to have all the actual values, so actual values. And now we want to add the actual values of our ingredients. So like that, for example, same thing here. We can change the name if we want to. We can have some limitations, units, nodes, whatever. So of course, this is the same unit as for the set points. And now you see we have 2 groups available here where we can just switch between them. And for example, if you want to change an value here to another group, similar thing as for the trend curves, you can select one of them and then click on change group assignment, and then you can move the value from one group to another. Right. So I've lost that one. And now you see we have another group inside of this trigger with the values we have added to this group. And then of course you can also use the default triggers here, or you can create some more manual triggers. There is no limitation of how many triggers you can have for the snapshots, so you can freely define how many snapshots or how you want to trigger the snapshots here. And the last thing, that's it for the snapshots. The last thing are the alarms. For the alarms, of course, if we want to receive the alarms from WinCC in the reports, we have to add the alarms here. And for that, just again, select the alarms here. So select the entry, do a right click, go to the context menu, and then new alarm group. We can have a new name, say for example, alarms. And then you remember that we had added an alarm archive inside of the PIM server. So you see it here in the background. And this is needed for the selection of the alarm group inside of the PIM quality. So as I just mentioned before, we need the data, or all of the data we need for the PIM quality. All of them has to be available inside of the PIM server. And for the alarms, we save all of the alarms coming from WinCC or a third-party system or whatever. We store all of the alarms in the alarm archive in the PIM server, and now we can just select which servers or which archive we want to use to get the data or to get all of the alarms, to add them to a specific production unit, and then that means that we can add them to a report here. So of course, if we go to archive, we just have one archive at the moment, as we just have added one archive here. If you have more than one alarm archive, then of course you have a list of all the archives available here, and then you can select the one you want to assign to this group here inside of this production unit. The next thing here are the alarm blocks. So at the right side, you see the alarm blocks which are available in the report. So by default, we have the state of the alarm, the timestamp, instance, number, and station. And at the left side, you see all the available blocks, which we have imported to the PM Agent Unified station, and then added to the alarm archive. So all of these information are also available for us, and if we want to make them available inside of the report, so if we want to get the information coming from these alarm blocks in the report, then we can add them to the right side. So for example, we want to get the message text and we want to get the point of error, and the other ones will not be used, so we do not have to add them to the report. But of course, you can add everything here using these buttons, for example. Then you can just put everything to the left or to the right. Or if you use the buttons above here, you can just add the selected block to the report, or other way around. So if you select one of them and then click on the other side, then it's no longer available in the report. We can also have some filters inside of this alarm group of PM quality. So we remember in the alarm archive, so if you go back to the PM server in the background here, we remember here we have some filter settings, and if we have some filters inside of the alarm archives in the PM server, that means we do not store the alarms which do not fit the filter. Right, so we just store all the alarms which fit the filter, and all the other ones are not copied from WinCC to the PM server, as they do not fit the filter. And the filter here is working in a similar way. The difference is, if we do not store the alarms in the PM server, then of course they are still not available for the PM quality, as they're not available in the PM server. If we filter inside of the PM quality, we still have the alarms available in the PM server, so we can have the alarm list and then go through all the alarms, for example. But inside of our report, we do not get all of these alarms, as we can set and filter here in this alarm group. this can be a filter after the point of error, for example. So if you just have the configuration like that and you have more than one production unit, then you will receive for this one configuration here, remember we are in the production unit P1 at the moment, and if we do not set any filter, then we receive all alarms of all production units in this report. So normally we just want to receive the alarms which are important for this specific batch, for this specific production unit. So that means it makes sense to set and filter here, and for that you can add in your filter, or you can use the filter which is by default created. So then just click on this button here to open the filter dialog, and you see the default filter do not have any filter inside of it. It's just that you can prepare the first filter set here, and we want to have or block or an end block, so it doesn't matter because we just want to add one filter here. Then we add a new row, and we want to filter by the point of error, and we want only filters which has the name P1. So because we just want to get the alarms corresponding to this production unit. This will work in my project here, because if we go back to my WinCC project and go to the alarm logging, then we will see that for this alarm I have configured, I have added the point of error P1. So of course, if you want to do something like that, be sure that you have the information inside of the alarm. So of course, if you do not have the information inside of the point of error, then you cannot use and filter using the point of error, because there's no data inside of it. So remember that. Right. Let's go back to PM quality like that. So now I have set and filter for the point of error, and we only want to receive alarms which are from the point of error P1. So of course I just have this one alarm configured in WinCC, so all the alarms we're receiving are for this one production unit. But normally you have some bigger projects, you have some more alarms, and then that you know how you can deal with that, so that you just receive the alarms which are important for this one production unit. But of course, if you want to receive all the alarms for all production units, for example, then it's also okay. So it's up to you how to configure, or up to the customer then, how they want to configure this information. But for you that you know how to use this filter, we will have this filter here for the moment. So we can click on OK with that one. And now we have configured one filter here. And the last thing here, normally you do not have to do something here, but if you have to, you're able to change something. So this is just some transmission part of the PM server archives. So that means, for example, if you know that you have a lot of alarms or something like that, then we can have a pre-acquisition or post-acquisition. That means we can start some seconds before the batch started, and we take all of the alarms from the alarm archive, or post-acquisition. That means, I don't know, 3 seconds. So if we change that 1 to 3 seconds after the batch is finished, we still get the alarms from the PM server, and we can have a delay for 90 seconds. So normally you do not have to change something here, but if you need some more alarms, because you know a short time before we start the batch, we already create an alarm which is important to have inside of the report for this batch, then you can work with the pre-acquisition, for example, and other way around. If we create some alarms after the batch is finished, but they are still important for this batch report, then you can use the post-acquisition so that we get some more alarms here. But normally you do not need that one, so we will skip this part here in the training project. And if we click on